Hello, I'm Joshua Causa, and this is my presentation on drugs in cycling and its impact on history. In any sport, there will always be those overly competitive athletes that will risk fame and fortune in order to achieve first place. But at what cost? The use of performance-enhancing drugs, PEDs, within cycling has been an issue for decades and seemingly shows no evidence of discontinuation of the use of performance-enhancing drugs. Striegel, Dickworth and Volkoma each came to various conclusions as to why cyclists would take part in the use of performance-enhancing drugs. Various reasons such as financial, social and athletic praise were the main ambitions of many cheating cyclists. Like world-renowned former cyclist Lance Armstrong, who had been stripped of 7 Tour de France titles. Lance Armstrong is a perfect example of doping in cycling. Public perception of the sport has changed drastically since the revelation, with much of the audience of the sport questioning the authenticity of a cyclist's abilities. This data graph here indicates the number of top 10 cyclists in each year Tour de France was held that had been caught using performance-enhancing drugs. Statistics like this came to light with the exposure of Lance Armstrong. People soon became under the impression that to compete within cycling and emerge the victor meant that he had been using performance-enhancing drugs to achieve victory. Australian cyclist and winner of the Tour de France in 2011, Cadel Evans, came under fire after his success as the first Australian to win the Tour de France. His statement, "As a clean athlete and to be accused of being a drug cheat, personally, it's a very offensive and very hard to take." PED users in cycling have subsequently made internationally praised sporting events such as the Tour de France a glorified sham. Dismissing any achievements made by clean and legit cyclists such as Cadel Evans, having those who excel in the sport and a possible PED user. In light of this effect, questions began to emerge. How would the cycling era change? The Movement for Credibility in Cycling, the MCC, more commonly known as the MPCC for its French interpretation, formed in 2007 within the professional cycling industry in light of the public's distaste in the use of performance-enhancing drugs, and worked on enabling methods for detection and punishment for the use of performance-enhancing drugs. Shortly after the formation of the MCC, the Spanish Cycling Federation created educational and prevention programs to combat the use of performance-enhancing drugs, which in turn supported the Preventing to Win scheme, a concept devised from the public perception of cycling in reference to the use of PEDs. Willy Voet, Belgian sports physiotherapist, who had been involved in the Festina affair, the doping scandal of 1998's Tour de France, perfectly describes how the use of performance-enhancing drugs in cycling have affected history. In his book, Breaking the Chain, Drugs and Cycling, The True Story, Voet says that cycling has gone too far, leaving its original values by the roadside. And to all those who participate in the use of performance-enhancing drugs, it is high time that we all understood our mistakes in order to recognize this evil and, I hope, eradicate it. Drug use in cycling has overall impacted history through how the sport is perceived. Public perception has shifted as a result of the use of performance-enhancing drugs in cycling. Questions begin to arise. whether legendary cyclist Eddy Merckx was in fact a legitimate athlete, since there was no additional testing during the early years of professional cycling. There were no use of PEDs in the early formations of cycling. Ultimately, it is unclear, but it is certain that today in modern professional cycling, use of PEDs has fundamentally impacted history through public perception of the cycling sport. Thank you.